I'm Cassandra Hearn, a top divorce litigator in California. I have a passion for educating you through your own divorce process. I've taken the toughest of divorce cases to trial, including everything from divorces worth millions of dollars to serious child abuse cases to cases where spouses have turned to wage war against each other. Over the past 15 years of litigation experience, I have seen all of the highs and lows that come with making your way through a divorce. I created this podcast to help you gain insight and get into the right mindset so you can do a divorce by yourself, and to help you make all the right decisions along the way. Whether you're just thinking about divorce or are right in the middle of one, if you're looking for information, tools, inspiration, and a community to help you through it, you're in the right place. Welcome to the podcast, where I will be sharing with you all of my divorce secrets. Let's talk about managing your divorce timeline and the thoughtful things you can do to approach the timeline in your divorce and try to keep it manageable. There are several factors that will influence how long your divorce might take. For the purposes of this discussion, I'm going to be referring to a standard divorce, also called a standard dissolution. And this is what most people will go through when they are seeking a divorce in the state of California. For others who may be eligible to file for a summary dissolution, which will have a much different timeline, check out the last podcast. That's podcast number 3, where I discuss what is a summary dissolution and do you qualify for one. For everybody else, here's a discussion about how you can help managing thoughtfully your divorce timeline. First, let's talk about what is it that needs to take place in order for your divorce to move forward, and how long does that stuff really take to have happen. So from the top, we want to think about starting by filing your divorce. How long does just filing it take? Well, the answer is it depends on where you are and which courthouse you plan to file in. Many of the state courthouses in California require that you electronically file your case, while others allow you to walk in on the day that you're ready to file and hand your paperwork to a clerk right then and there. That's called a counter filing. For those places where you do have to e-file, you won't exactly know how long it's going to take for the court to process your e-filing, because every clerk in every courthouse is different. And they all have different waiting times, but typically they really try to get to initial filings fairly quickly. So for some people, it will be on the very same day that they file, they get their e-filed documentation back. For other people in different locations, it could be a number of weeks before you receive your initial paperwork. The nice thing, though, about e-filing is that if you filed it on the 1st of the month, but you don't get it back till, let's say, the 20th of the month, your paperwork will still say that it was filed on the 1st of the month. The next phase that we want to talk about as far as the timeline of your case is concerned is the service of your petition and those initial papers that you filed to get your case opened. Service can take a little while if you don't know exactly where the person is, or if the person is dodging service. It could take a few minutes before you get that other party served. They do need to be personally served in the state of California for the best possible service. So our first timeline was filing. That could be same day up to several weeks. And the next deadline is getting personal service done. That could also be the first time and the same day that you try to get it done, or it could take some time to get the person served. The next topic we'll talk about as far as timeline of your divorce is concerned is relating to the initial phases of your case. You must start out by making your mandatory financial disclosures to the other party. The court actually gives you a deadline to complete this. It's within 60 days of the start of your case. Honestly, Most people take an awful lot longer to get it done because it's sort of a burdensome task. But one thing that you can do to keep your case moving along swiftly is to work on those financial disclosures right away. The next phase is twofold. One phase is called discovery, and the other is really motion work. Not every case needs discovery, and not every case needs any motion work. But if you're thinking about your timeline and how you can proactively manage it, it would make sense for you to start thinking right off the bat if you need discovery. Well, what is discovery? It's what the word sounds like. It's utilizing court tools and resources to discover information that the other party might have. I'll give you a really quick example. One example of discovery is a request for form interrogatories. And that's where you select a court form and it says, hey, I want you to answer these 20 questions. I'm just going to check the box for you to answer them. And so you serve that form to the other side, and then they have approximately 30 days to get their answers back to you. So as you can imagine, if you want discovery, you can build a minimum of an additional 30 days, more likely plan for 45 for just getting responses back from discovery. Now, what about motion work? This can vary widely. It depends on what your motion is. For example, you might bring a motion for the court to determine child custody in your case. That's a really common one. This type of a motion can take a while because most courthouses in the state of California require parties to participate in mandatory mediation prior to even seeing a judge in a custody request. So depending again on how backed up your court is, how backed up your mediators might be, and how long of a wait it is to finally see your judge, these types of motions can range from anywhere around 3 months waiting time to 6+ months. I've even seen it take a year. That's not the only type of motion you can bring, though, in family court. There are plenty of other kinds of motions. Other common motions include things like child support, spousal support, control of assets, payments of debts, and so on. So all of these motions tend to take up time in how long the timeline of your case may be. Next, the court also requires parties to attend mediation or a mandatory settlement conference in addition to trying to get their case to move forward. And most courthouses won't even set a trial until you complete this task. That is, if you can't settle on your own. So how long does it take to go to mediation or a mandatory settlement conference? You guessed it. It depends on how backed up your court is. But in any event, once both parties say, we're done with our mandatory financial disclosures, we're done with our motion work, and we're done with discovery, that's when the court will set either the mandatory mediation or the mandatory settlement conference. That can take yet another couple of months to arrive at once everybody says that they're ready. Finally, if your case does not settle and you're still scratching your head saying, how long is this going to take me? The final step, and the longest wait usually, is for trial. And that's after everything else has failed to settle your case. Well, how long is the wait for trial? It depends, your favorite phrase. It depends because how long is your trial going to last? Some people have only a few issues in their case that are left to try once they get to this phase. Other people have been able to settle absolutely nothing and want to try every issue in their case. So there's a wide range of variability in how many issues you feel you need to try versus how long the wait is going to be to get into a courtroom in front of a judge to have that trial. I'll give you an example too. If you can imagine, every single issue is ripe for challenge and the parties are going to have experts or they're going to call witnesses in their case, and it's going to be a knockdown, drag-out battle. In family court, these cases can last a week or even several weeks, depending on how complex they are. As you can imagine, if the court doesn't have much time to hear your motion just on child custody, it's not going to have a lot of time to hear a 5-day or 15-day trial if it's 1 to 3 weeks. So in this scenario, couples waiting for a judge to hear their matter will oftentimes be waiting upwards of a year to get onto the court's trial calendar. That sounds pretty crazy. And that's from the time the trial is set, not from the time of the beginning of the case. In those types of scenarios, you might also consider eliminating issues if you can to get a more manageable timeline in your wait for a trial. For example, can the parties come to a few agreements about how things will look at trial? Can you agree on a neutral expert instead of 2 experts? Can you agree to the value of various pieces of evidence? Can you just narrow the issues? Instead of saying, let's try everything, let's mediate a few of these issues instead and then go to trial on some of the others. So if you can narrow the scope of your trial, you may find that a shorter trial estimate, such as 1 day or maybe even 3 days, can really bring you to trial an awful lot faster in your jurisdiction. So what other things can be done along the way to help you navigate and shorten and manage your timeline in your divorce? Well, as I mentioned briefly at the beginning, those mandatory financial disclosures often trip people up and slow things down. In fact, you can start working on your mandatory financial disclosures before you even file your case. So if you're thinking ahead and you're planning for a divorce, or you're just thinking about it, definitely work on helping yourself by gathering your finances together before you get started. For help and information on how to do this, definitely check out Divorce Secrets course number 1, which is all about pre-filing and how to file your divorce the right way. Other things you can do to help reduce and manage your divorce timeline is, surprisingly enough, trying to work together. You don't have to wait for the court to set your mandatory mediation or mandatory settlement conference in order to try to settle. You, in fact, can work with your spouse and a neutral or anyone of your choice at any point in your case. That's right, you heard me say it. You can mediate or you can negotiate anytime during your divorce to try to speed things up. That is probably one of the best time-saving bits of advice that I could give anyone. Take control of your own case by working together and negotiating as much and as often as you can. Lastly, one more thing you can do to help move your case forward is to be proactive at every stage. I know that divorces can seem to drag on for ages, but the more proactive you can be for every element in your case, the sooner you will find yourself at the end of your divorce. Stick with it, hang in there, and keep pushing to move forward. Optimism goes a long way too. Be sure to tune in to the next podcast where we'll be talking about how your choices impact your divorce timeline. And we'll be sharing some tips and advice on how to make the best choices possible.